Hi, Evan.
Hello.
It's the new space.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
We're not in the Zendo.
Looks gorgeous.
It's really beautiful, Evan.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm not there with you.
You aren't.
You,
Sure you are.
you are in spirit, as Adam said. So I think, is it time?
It's basically time. Yes.
Okay.
We have 1 minute maybe?
1 minute, okay. It's all right. He's babysitting.
Well, I see something that says Richard.
Yeah, I was waiting to see if that was him.
Probably is.
So, good evening, everybody. No, that's not Richie Davidson.
Why am I here?
So I want to welcome, first of all, the wonderful people who are on site, and also our online community. We have around 900 people registered online. We know many fewer will show up for when the presentations are going. But one of the incredible things about this particular exploration that we've been doing for years is that it's one of those things since Zoom entered our lives where all of a sudden people are accessing this huge wisdom library that Upaya has and the years of work that we have made available to people, content and practice. Yeah. I don't remember how many years ago, maybe you do, Bhushan, or Noah, you do, when we started the Varela Symposium.
Zen Brain.
It was originally Zen Brain, and we called it Zen Brain because of our good friend, Jim Austin, who is heading toward his 100th year. And he just sent me a beautiful statue of Bodhidharma done by a renowned artist from Nara. He's deaccessioning. So you know how things happen. You get to a certain age and you want less. At a certain age, you want more. Then you get to an age and you want less. And so Jim just sent this wonderful statue. We haven't placed it yet, but in any case, this work around studying the mind in relation to contemplative states and neural mapping and so on, has been going on actually since the 70s. If you remember Joe Kamiya and others, with just a few little leads on the head would draw massive conclusions. Now there's 260 leads on the head, and one is for each precept that a monk's take. No, sorry. But in any case, I was so fortunate to be what's called a Lindisfarne Fellow. Thank you, Evan. I always think of Bill when we come together. Evan's father, William Irwin Thompson, started the Lindisfarne Fellowship, of which Evan was a part, and also Francisco Varela and Gregory Bateson and Schumacher, and just an extraordinary collection of people, artists and scholars and contemplatives. And the point of our coming together every year was to actually, in a funny way, to make music together, kind of like a jazz ensemble. And we never knew where the music would go. I mean, that was one of the things that Bill was so brilliant at, creating this sort of spirit of adventure and exchange. And nobody criticized anybody else, although there were wild discussions, right, Evan? And not the least of which, many were initiated by your old mentor, Bob Thurman. Oh my God. It's like, oh my God. But in any case, it's in that context that Evan and I became friends, though you were 12 at the time. I'm almost 82, so I can, pull the age card on you. But also, it was in that context also where I met Francisco. And in meeting a contemplative who was also a social activist who left his country because of the extraordinary cruelty of Pinochet. And it drove, in a certain way, it drove Francisco out of Maturana's lab. He ended up in Nicaragua at a certain point. He ended up at Harvard. He ended up in Europa, and he ended up not only a great neuroscientist, being a great neuroscientist. He actually, I guess his last gig was at the École Polytechnique. He was not only a great neuroscientist and really thinking out of the box, but he also was a contemplative and a philosopher. And his philosophy wasn't conventional Cartesian philosophy. He was definitely looked at things from the point of view of phenomenology, a branch of philosophy that is something that has influenced, I think, all of us sitting here, at least up here, and certainly the mind and life people, but we're turning toward even more strongly at this point from the studies and the sort of exploration of the inactive perspective. And we spent various Varela events on inaction. And thanks to you, Evan. Do you remember, what were they? They were embodied, embedded. What else?
Embodied, embedded, emergent,
Emergent,
extended. The E's go on.
Yeah, the E's go on. It was all in action. And Evan has fortunately, taken this perspective, which really, in part, arose out of the work with Maturana, but also the interactions with Evan over the years. Really looking at, are we separate from the context of our lived experience? And also because how neuroscience per se is so bloody neurocentric, everything, is mapping the neural network kind of dance. And we're always, looking for what part of the brain is lighting up, when you feel compassion. It's like, no, it's not like that. But in any case, the neurocentric perspective is something that we've been kind of destructuring through the years of our relationships with each other. And then Francisco and I re-met, outside the context of Lindisfarne, first at a meeting in Spain where it was in 80 or 81, and then went over to, we met again I was just telling Adam and John and Molly, at a very important gathering on complex adaptive systems that was in a meeting that Francisco was part of, also Ilya Prigogine and Karl Pribram and various others. Oh, Kenneth Arrow. I remember his line. He was the Nobel laureate in economics. He says, money is nothing but a piece of paper with the word money printed on it. And I keep saying that, but that doesn't feel always like that, as simple as that. But in any case, because in part of Jim Austin's wonderful work, his book Zen Brain, and he came here, we named the series Zen Brain for years, but we realized it wasn't Zen, it wasn't the brain. So we decided to change the name. And people said, no, Roshi, you can't change the name. That's bad branding. And I said, I don't care about branding. I care about accuracy. So we changed the name. Who cared? But in any case, our friendships span oceans and continents. And it's just, I'm always so happy to see Evan and Kristen, who has been here. And I'm really so grateful, Kristen, that you're in our midst for this weekend because of not only your work, but your part in this recent declaration. And we were just talking about the complete madness of animal experimentation that, of course, has been carried out by the cosmetic industry and by neuroscientists and so on and so forth. And our relationship with the world of creatures, of course, reflects our objectification of the natural world. And so part of, our work here at UPIA, and I want to acknowledge my beloved colleague, Wendy Johnson, the master gardener, and for her bringing that sensibility to, what it is to create and foster and be nurtured by a living system. So we're in this space today. And I'm particularly happy it's happening in this room. This building, as you know, was inspired by a good friend who died week before last, Tom Driscoll, who provided the funding for Varela over the years. And I was fortunate to be sitting with him the day before he died, and I was very grateful. But he wanted to see this building created, and he wanted it because he so believed in the mission of UPIA, which is this relationship between the contemplative experience and social and environmental responsibility and fundamental ethics. And in part, we want to explore, poke into, in the next few days, a pretty radical critique on the scientific method, as it turns out. We also are, heading into this critique, I would say, humbly, except you're not humble, but no. Oh, that's right, you're not humble either. Molly and I are humble. No, I'm kidding. But we're sailing into this critique, in part because at the end of last year's Varela's Symposium, we became more sensitized to the fact that artificial intelligence was going to have some kind of psychosocial impact, and that it has an extraordinary environmental impact that is not a positive one. And that it was important for us to look at the ethos and ethics associated with the unfolding of AI in our midst, and how do we meet a world that where conscience is not, and ethics is not embedded into the system, though Dr. O wants to, make the structure of AI reflect the bodhisattva perspective. I read the paper last year or whenever, and I was like, really? I think you need more wetness to be a bodhisattva, actually. So we want to look at AI, but we also have a number of things that we're going to be tangling in, including this amazing book done recently released by Evan and Adam and Marcel Gleiser on the blind spot in science. And it really is, it's an earth-shaking book, Evan, so thank you for, I just watched your talk at Marcel's place, and you and Michelle kind of had that exchange. Michelle Bitpon.
Right.
So, we have a chance to really shake things up a little bit here in terms of how we relate to the God that we believe in, which is science. And we want to really be radical about this. But first, I see, friends gathered online, and what I'd love to do, you might wonder what I'm looking at. There's actually a monitor at our feet. And there are monitors on either side. I'd love and I forgot to bring my computer, Noah, but I'd love to just ask you all online first, just to put in your bioregion or your watershed, just to kind of get a sense. And maybe, Noah, if you can track that and just sort of share some of the places people are dialed in from, which is all.
Yeah, we can say more than Vancouver and San Diego. Virginia,
British Columbia.
New York, Los Angeles, Oakland.
Our European contingent's in bed, by the way.
Yes, exactly. We might get a few
Bogota.
Bogota,
Bogota.
Jersey.
Yeah, maybe we'll get some. There's Australian. I knew it. Yeah, of course. It's not too off time wise there.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, wonderful.
Mexico
Mexico City. And how about here? Are there who's come more than 1,000 miles? Anyone here come more than 1,000 miles? Where'd you come from? Okay, yeah.
Cool.
Victoria, a couple of Canadians.
Jun Suk, where are you?
Uh-huh.
Jun Suk?
And
where
you came from? Oh, Seoul, South Korea. I think you may win the prize.
And Jun,
Yeah.
where are you from now?
Seoul,
Also
South
Seoul.
Korea. Well, welcome.
Okay,
welcome.
great.
Anyone else? Well, we thought we might take a moment and just let those of you who are here right now just turn to a neighbor, and there are going to be plenty of opportunities for us all to commune, as it were, over meals and in between sessions. But maybe take a moment now and just turn to somebody, maybe preferably somebody you don't know, and just introduce yourself briefly. What's your name? We don't have time to go through everyone's name here, but maybe just introduce yourself to a neighbor and a little bit about yourself. Take a couple of minutes to do that.
You two do it. Adam, I'll do it with you. Hey, Adam.
Nice to meet you. You good? I think I heard of you. I've seen your picture somewhere.
I'll let you do it at the end. You're gonna do it at
Mike's are on.
You're gonna do it at the end.
You want to start off with Ed?
We can start with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to do that?
Evan?
So everyone, we're gonna. Righty then.
That's enough. That's enough friendly.
Hello.
Class.
Hello. Raise your hand if you want to be quiet for a moment.
Class.
Raise your hand if you want to be quiet for a moment. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Such good
Class.
kids. So yes, there's already so much that Roger has said about what we're doing this weekend. This topic, which is what we've called sentience and intelligence, AI, the more than human, and us, is going to be about more than that title. I'm quite confident. And we have some really amazing people here all lined up. I want to remind you that there is the resource page. So if you're registered, whether you're online or here in person, there is a resource page which contains readings and which also will tell you a little bit more about our participants. And of course, on the main landing page, you can see the biographies of each of our participants. So I don't really want to go through and sort of, read out, oh, who's here and who's going to do what. But I will remind you that our schedule is that tomorrow morning, we're going to go tonight until about 8:45. And then tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, we'll have a meditation session, which I will be leading. I suppose you could call it that. And then we'll start our first morning session at 10. And we'll hear from Molly Crockett and then Luke Steele, rather, in the morning. Thank you. And then in the afternoon, we'll hear from Evan, starting at 2:30. We'll have lunch at 12:30. Then at 2:30, we'll hear from Evan Thompson and Kristen Andrews. Then we'll have a meditation of 5:30, led by Molly. 6:30 dinner, and then we'll come back in an evening session to hear from Adam Frank at 7:45. So it's going to be a very full day tomorrow. Keep that hydration going. You'll hear at the end of our session tonight, you'll hear from Noah Kodo, who's going to give us some more advice about how to be safe here at Upaya. And then Sunday morning, we'll have Richie Davidson, and my role will be to try to summarize things at the end and maybe add a few thoughts of my own. So that's our basic schedule at this point, but we thought it might be interesting for all of us actually to hear a little bit from each of us who is available right now. We don't have everyone online. Our European friends aren't here. I do want to say that this is co-sponsored, which is the second time now.
I think it's
Is the
fourth
time. Okay. Oh, I've lost track, obviously. What a surprise. Mind and Life Europe is our co-sponsor for the Varela Symposium, and they've been very active in this area of the enactive perspective. And we'll be hearing from Amy Varela and Gabor Karshai, part of the main leadership of Mind and Life Europe throughout the program. But our European friends are not available online right now. And Richie Davidson, I think, is on grandfather duty. So we may not hear from him tonight either, but we will eventually hear from him on Sunday. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and invite, I'm just going to sort of roll the dice, which Roshi loaded, and I'm going to ask Evan to start us out with just a few thoughts about what we might hear from you. What are some of the questions that are in your mind? Not asking you to give your talk, but maybe give us a little bit of a teaser.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Am I coming through?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay, good. I think the title I gave was Life, Sentience, and Intelligence. And the talk that I'm going to give tomorrow is broken into 3 sections, 3 parts, divided into 3 parts. So the first part is what is life? And I'm going to go through ideas about life and self-organization and autopoiesis that derive very much from Maturana and Varela's work, but also with connections to more recent work. And most of my talk is actually going to be about that, because it's really the question of what is life and the perspective on life that comes out of that kind of research is very much the framework for what I'm then going to go on to do in the second and third section. So the second section will raise the question, could all life be sentient? And so that's going to involve some thoughts about what exactly we mean, or we might mean, in using the word or invoking the concept of sentience, and how to think about that in relationship to life, to being alive, to being a living organism, or being a living being. The question will not be answered. It's really meant to be a question that might reorient how we think about sentience and life in relationship to each other. But I'm not going to propose a definitive answer to the question. And I should say the question is framed within a context of important, new work that Kristen has really been a part of in enlarging our sense of sentience in relationship to animals. But of course, from a biological perspective, animals are one of the kingdoms of living beings. But of course, there are many other forms of living beings that aren't animals. And so we want to think about what sentience might mean if we're not talking about animals. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about that and raising that question. And then the end of the talk, the final section is going to be, what about AI? And really, I'm going to make the point that AI, as we know it today, and as at least we can project it into the future based on the kind of computational design principles that constitute AI today, that AI fundamentally lacks virtually all of the crucial constitutive organizational properties of life. And that means that has a number of implications. It means that AI is really best thought of as a model and as a tool that we use, but is in no way agential on its own, in no way has knowledge on its own, and certainly doesn't have sentience or consciousness on its own. And so a lot of the recent discussions about AI consciousness and AI sentience, I think, are hyperbolic. I think they're science fictional, and they are real distractions from the fundamentally important questions about AI, which are questions about how we use these very powerful tools that we've created and that encode many kinds of biases in terms of how they are structured with their data sets and the kinds of statistical correlations that they look for, and that depend on huge resource extraction. And so the really imperative question about AI is, can we use it in a safe and wise way that's beneficial to ourselves and that also is not incredibly destructive and degrading of the environment? So that, in a nutshell, is the talk that I'll be giving tomorrow.
Thanks very much, Evan.
I think we ought to take a breath.
Yeah, I do. That was just the teaser of the talk. The teaser trailer. Thanks a lot. I'm really looking forward to it. And of course, I'll just mention that Evan and Adam are, as Roshi said, are the co-authors of this book, The Blind Spot. And I'm sure that part of what we'll hear is going to be relevant to that book as well, but especially that chapter on cognition and consciousness, which I think you probably wrote most yourself, Evan. Those two chapters. If you're really energetic tonight, download the book and have a look. It's really, I think, could prepare you well. So let me now turn it to someone in person, and that's Molly Crockett. And you can read more about Molly, of course, on the resource page and on the main landing page. Molly's now at Princeton University. She works on moral psychology, but a lot of other things as well. I've used your work in class. I don't know if you know that, about, for example, the echo chamber and the role of moral outrage. So I'm really looking for, and you've also recently published a couple of papers, right, on AI, so in prominent venues. So I'm looking forward to hearing what's your teaser.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so like many of us, I've been thinking about AI, and in particular thinking about many of the promises that people who build these tools make about what they can do now, what they might do in the future. And many of these promises or visions or fantasies are like really intense, both on the positive side and the negative side. And I think that examining the kinds of visions that all sorts of people have about AI reveals something interesting about what knowledge is, what intelligence is, and how we might think about the trajectories that we're on and whether we want things to be otherwise. So over the past couple of years, I've been collaborating with a brilliant, wonderful friend, Lisa Masseri, who's an anthropologist of science and technology. I'm a cognitive scientist, and I have used AI tools in my work. As John mentioned, we've used machine learning to measure moral outrage on social media and how those algorithms tend to amplify content that is divisive and outrageous in ways that are harmful for our ability to understand one another. Lisa and I have been lately thinking about the visions that scientists have about AI tools, and the ways in which scientists are imagining AI taking over or being an autonomous collaborator at every stage of the research process, from reading the scientific literature to generating questions to simulating data, analyzing that data, doing peer review, assessing the quality of the research that comes out. And quite a lot of critique of AI takes the form of questioning whether the promises of people who build these tools are actually realistic, right? So tech company will be like, AI can do this amazing thing. And then a critic will be like, no, it can't. What we want to do instead is think about, well, let's imagine a future where AI tools do everything that they promise to do. Is that a future that we want? And in thinking about whether that is a future that we want, does that help us imagine alternative futures and ways we might bring those about? And so tomorrow I will be talking about the visions of AI in scientific research, the illusions of understanding that they can bring about, where we believe we understand more about the world than we actually do. And in particular, I'm going to focus on one vision of AI that we call the surrogate, where AI models can replace human beings, both in scientific research about human beings, but then also in applications from tutors to therapists to companions to even spiritual guides. And so we'll think about what those fantasies are and what they might reveal about the nature of intelligence and wisdom.
Thank you very much. Another enticing teaser for sure. I think that one of tomorrow morning, we're going to have a very interesting time, because I just want to mention again that Luke Steels is going to be giving his talk after Molly's. And Luke, who's a professor emeritus in artificial intelligence from the University of Brussels in Belgium, he studied linguistics and philosophy at Antwerp. But he's been very involved in AI, I would say, in a sense, both from a kind of philosophical and an industry side. So that combination, I think, could prove really quite interesting. So stay tuned for that. We can't hear from Luke tonight, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes of that kind of combination of your talk and his. Maybe I turn it over now, if I might, to Kristen. So again, you can read all about Kristen and her background. We're really pleased to have you here this year, Kristen. She's a really distinguished author and scholar. She holds the York Research Chair in Animal Minds and Professor of Philosophy at York University in Toronto. And you can read about her several publications. She's been very influential in our understanding of what we mean, in a sense, by animal minds, which is almost the title of one of her books. And without saying more, I'll just turn it over to you, Kristen. And if you could give us also a little bit of a hint about what we might hear from you and what kinds of questions you're going to be examining.
Sure. Thanks, John. And hi to everybody. It's really nice to be back here at Upaya, even virtually, from like 5 or 6 years after I was there as a student. So it's a nice transition. So my talk, I'm going to be kind of asking people to think about animals that they might not normally think about. So many discussions of animal intelligence and consciousness have to do with things like chimpanzees recognizing themselves in mirrors, or crows using tools in order to achieve goals. But I want to invite you to think about bumblebees that learn how to pull strings, and other bumblebees watch what they do and learn from observing. I want to invite you to think about C. elegans, these microscopic worms who associatively learn things about their environment. When we start turning our attention away from the charismatic animals that probably most of us think about when we hear the word animal, we see some amazing behaviors as well. Some of these are behaviors that look quite rational, but others of them look deeply social. So one of my favorite social examples these days are of fruit flies. You know, the little bugs that right now are landing on my sourdough starter downstairs. I think of them quite differently since I read the study where a fruit fly female who was watching another fruit fly female decide who to mate with, and selected a male with a pink mark on his back rather than a male with a green mark on his back. When the observer then got a chance to mate, she chose a pink marked guy. And then the other females in the group all started choosing pink marked guys. And this effect lasted for several generations before it started to degrade a bit. So the same sort of social learning that's so important for human lives, we see also in animals that we might not even think of when we think of animals. So I'm not going to talk about those particular cases tomorrow, but that's kind of a teaser to get us going on the question that I'm going to be asking, and that is, what makes us think an animal is conscious? And what is the evidence that we might have for animal consciousness? And the best kind of evidence that we have, I think, really does lead us down to this conclusion that we're already really implicitly, at least in the science, the methods that the science is using should take all animals to be conscious. This is despite the fact that you see again and again the kind of neurocentric bias that Roshi already mentioned happening when people like the philosopher Michael Tai or the neuroscientist Anil Seth write in their books that a nematode worm couldn't possibly be conscious because they have fewer than 350 neurons. When I ask them, how many neurons do you need? No one can tell me. And so I figure that maybe the neuron count is not so relevant. What's relevant is these behaviors that we see, right? It's the social behaviors, it's the agential behaviors, goal-directed behaviors, responsiveness to the environment. And these sorts of markers make us think that the animals that we're living with, other humans, dogs, cats, cockatoos, parrots, fish, that they're conscious, and that those same markers can be used for us to conclude that all animals are conscious. One of the questions I often get are, what about plants? What about slime molds? Are they conscious too? And I just say, I don't think we know enough about the behaviors of plants and slime molds for me to be able to give you a very informative opinion on that yet. I'll also be talking about AI and whether we can use these same markers to make decisions about AI consciousness. And I have to say that I agree with Evan here on this point. I think that there's a lot of exuberance for reasons that I think are not entirely warranted about the possibility of AI intelligence. And I'm worried that it would lead to a kind of absurdity where people are more worried about the moral status of our computers than they are about the ants and bumblebees that they're living with every day. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the New York Declaration of Consciousness and the relationship between this work in philosophy and science and comparative cognition and policy, what sort of implications it could have on the world. So I look forward to the conversation with everyone.
Great. Thank you, Kristen, so much.
Thank you. Looking forward to that very much. I remember actually at my PhD graduation, Alan Greenspan was the speaker, and in 99, and he was talking about irrational exuberance. So I wonder if we're in this, which preceded the dot-com crash. So I wonder if we're in the same place, a little bit of irrational exuberance. With
I have another term for it.
Yeah, yes, go
Yes.
right ahead.
Hedonic curiosity.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I made it up.
Can we say
Right here on the spot?
how about exuberant hedonic
Yeah,
curiosity?
exuberant hedonic curiosity. That is filled with those entities.
Yes, well, maybe some of them are online. So
Well, maybe I'm sitting next to a few of them myself.
I've had my moments of irrational exuberance for sure. Do we have Richie Kodo-san? Do you see? He's not on. Okay, so I guess Richie's caught up in grandpa duty. So with that in mind, we'll turn it over to Adam, who will be the last speaker tomorrow. Adam Frank is a professor at the University of Rochester in astrophysics. You may have seen him on NPR or in the New York Times or CNN during the eclipse. He was on for like 4 hours or something.
It's gonna happen. I swear to God, it's gonna-
And talking about mysticism, you told me, I think, actually, didn't you say, the sacred, the sacred?
I did at one point, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
the sacred. And in addition to being a co-author in The Blind Spot, Adam actually has another book recently out, The Little Book of Aliens, on a completely different topic, which is something you talked about last year, actually, as I recall.
I've talked about aliens here.
Yes.
I thought I was going to be talking about aliens this time, alien intelligence, but instead that's
So
not,
something
that's not
else
what I'm
happened.
talking about.
All right. Well, what are you talking about? Give
But
me.
I do hope you'll say something about alien intelligence, but not tonight.
Not tonight. No. Okay, so what am I talking about? First of all, I just want to say how what a pleasure it is to be here again. The first time I did this was I realized it was 2018. So it's now been 6 years, and it was because of Evan. Thank you very much, who sort of recommended me to you guys. Because this place, I have to say, the symposium has utterly changed my thinking. Like, you know,
Hold it closer to the top.
to the top,
Yeah, just like that.
like this.
Yeah, because it blocks the signal.
I see. Thank you. Just because this is such an unusual sort of forum for doing scientific and philosophical thinking, but in a way that is entirely different from any other place I've done it before. Not only because it's also supportive, though certainly engaged conversations, but also there's this sense of there are places that need to be explored that you're going to have a hard time exploring anywhere else. And this topic, actually, I think we're doing this week, very much, or this weekend, is very much along those lines. So what I'm going to be talking about, I'm the staff astrophysicist for the Varela Symposiums. And so one of the things, you know, if this topic is about sentience, what often will happen is there's always this question, well, you know, what is the substrate, right? How does intelligence, consciousness, experience rise out of the physical background? We just sort of assume that, well, the physics is the thing that we have to explain how sentience arises or is embedded in physics. And one of the things I've thinking about for a while is it's the other way around. You actually have to ask how physics is embedded in sentience or experience, because experience comes first. You have to be experiencing before you can make the distinction between, like, oh, there's the physical world and there's the other stuff that's not the physical world. That's downstream. That kind of conceptual split is downstream from, you know, from having experience, from being an experiencer, from being embedded, inactive, etc. All the other E's. Extended, thank you, in the world. So Evan and Marcelo Gleiser and I, based on conversations that started in actually 2017, have just recently finished a book called The Blind Spot: Why Science Cannot Ignore Human Experience. And the fundamental idea of the book is that science has it all wrong. Or it's not really, I want to be careful, because it's not so much science. We love science. We are big fans of science. It's this metaphysics, it's this philosophy that got glued onto science somewhere around the 17th or 18th century, that claims to speak for science. So when people say, oh, sentience is nothing but neural activity, right? And neural activity is nothing but the activity of atoms, and atoms are nothing but, et cetera, et cetera. That metaphysics, actually, that's not science. Science doesn't say that. That's a philosophy that emerged out of what happened in the successes of science in the 17th and 18th century. And it certainly made sense at the time, but it doesn't make sense anymore. It doesn't make sense from the scientific perspective, because actually we see all of these paradoxes arising from in physics itself, and cosmology and quantum mechanics, but also paradoxes arising in biology, paradoxes arising in cognition and studies of consciousness. And the debates that we're having about AI are so right in the middle of the blind spot. And what we mean by the blind spot, I won't go much further than this, but to say that the central metaphor is your eye has a blind spot, right? The blind spot is where the optic nerve, connects to the eye, and there's basically a place that makes seeing possible, but which you can't see in that spot, right? And that's really what the blind spot in science is. Experience is science's blind spot, or science's metaphysical blind spot. Experience, which is what you have to start with, is what allows scientific theorizing to happen, but it has been completely eradicated from the discussion of science, other than this weird thing of like, you're just a meat robot, and I just really need to figure out sort of, what's going on and the wiring in your brain, and then I can figure out the meat robot. So what I'm going to be doing in the talk is I'm going to be walking through the central ideas. Evan's going to cover a lot of the stuff with cognition and consciousness. I'm going to focus more on the philosophical background that supports the idea of the blind spot. I'm not going to offer solutions. I'll point in some direction to some of the solutions, but I want to really lay out the case that there's this fundamental problem with the way we think about science, and to get over it or get past it. And most importantly, to develop a kind of science where the dangers that this version of AI that we have poses to us, that those dangers we can recognize and act effectively to deal with those dangers, is going to require this fundamental new conception of nature that will require going past to the blind spot. So that's the plan. That's the teaser trailer. So.
A new conception of nature. Wow. Looking forward to that.
In an hour.
Yeah, in an hour. Yeah.
Nonetheless.
Now, here's what's scary is these guys play games on their, digital memory boards every day, right? What is it called?
Not every day.
Not every day, but a lot of days. It's been a lot of
been
days. John and I are
several
both gamers, and so
Yeah.
like it turned out, which I realized from from these conversations at
Yeah.
Varela,
Yeah.
and so
Don't worry, there'll be no game unless you guys want it. I mean, we hook it up and we can have, we sometimes actually, we've talked about the blind spot quite a lot while wandering through Sweden shooting robots.
there's a little pause between the robot shooting. And
It's not a well-known game, Generation Zero, but it's fun. Awesome game. No killing. Unless robots are sentient.
Wait.
Not these robots.
So my name is John Dund, and I'm going to be kind of batting cleanup or something like that, to use a baseball metaphor. I'll be in the last spots on Sunday, and my role will be to try to bring together what we've heard and maybe add a few things of my own. I do want to say, just to reinforce part of what we've heard from several people, including Adam, is that this is a really unusual, I guess a little bit like Linda's one, right?
Yeah.
You bring so many different kinds of voices together, people with different kinds of backgrounds, interests, and have a conversation about a topic that they somehow manage to actually speak to each other about, right? Because sometimes at academic conferences, it's very hard for us to do that because we can't be wrong, or at least we have to be right anyway. And we have to guard our territory and make sure the silo is still in place and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard to have these types of interdisciplinary conversations in those contexts, but we managed to do that very well here. However, what that means is that if I'm trying to not exactly summarize, but somehow bring together everything that's happened over the weekend, it's not an easy task. So I'm just going to ask you ahead of time to please forgive me for not doing a very good job of it. I'll try, but it's hard to bring all of these different perspectives together. I'll probably add a little bit of my own point of view, but I would say that I gave a talk on Wednesday here, a Dharma talk.
Great. Who heard that talk? Raise your hand. The rest of you need to really access it. It was wonderful job.
And I thank you, Roshi. It's always hard for me to tell, but one of the things that I was really concerned with in that talk is the sort of distinction between wisdom and intelligence, but also the distinction between what you might call really epistemological distinctions between the way in the nature of conceptual knowledge and how conceptual knowledge can be or can fail to be grounded in experience. And this, of course, which you've already pointed to, Adam, this is, of course, a key issue with AI, is the failure for the kind of knowledge we get from large language models, for example, to actually be grounded in experience. The AI itself, ChatGPT, if somehow it gets the idea that, the moon is made out of green cheese, since what ChatGPT is doing is just collating all of our own crazy ideas and trying to select the ones that statistically look to be the best, if somehow, I don't know, we did all start to hallucinate that the moon is green cheese. Well, ChatGPT can't go outside and sort of look and say, does it look like green cheese? Can't do that. It can't test it in its own experience. The kind of knowledge we get from large language models is not knowledge that's grounded in experience. Of course, there's a lot of our own knowledge these days is like that, right? Where we hold things to be true that we don't have experiential evidence for. And that's part of what it means to be a modern person, I suppose. So that's part of what I may bring up, some of those issues, because they're in the Buddhist context, they're very closely connected actually to questions of consciousness and what it means for experience, both to provide, to be epistemic. In what sense does our experience yield knowledge to us? Some kind of knowledge that is, at least in some sense of the term, conceptual, is not conceptual. So how do we make sense of that idea? And how does that connect then to our capacity to be aware, to be conscious? So I may get into some of that as well, but I may be too occupied just trying to bring together all of the amazing things I'm sure we're going to hear this weekend. So we'll see what happens. Richie's not here, so we have a little extra time.
Well, what I wanted to actually ask us to do now that you in the direction we're heading into. And what I would like to ask you to do actually is to begin to craft some questions. And for our online community, Noah, if you could tonight, if there are questions that are going to be posed, capture that so that we can have our community up here access those. And also, we would love to hear your questions as well. It's really, it will shape the directions in which we go. And I say directions plural, by the way, for a reason, because as you will see, we will be working with many different strands of thinking and experience in the context of what we're going to be exploring. So for the on-site people, what would be great, Noah, do we have paper and pens? Yeah, good. If we could begin this process of putting, just these are questions that we'll share with the whole faculty, and it will, be stirring up various perspectives in us. But the other thing that is the practice. Maybe unbeknownst to you, the entire faculty for Varela, all of us are contemplatives. Thank you, Adam, who's a Zen person. Molly, Theravadan perspective. John, the Tibetan perspective held by Richie. And Luke is probably just naturally that way.
Born that way.
Born that way.
Evan's a Tai Chi guy, among other things.
And
Yeah.
Evan's not a Buddhist. Sorry, Evan.
I'm a non-aligned
He's
mystic.
not Buddhist.
I don't know if you got the joke.
That's a particular
Evan-
brand of Buddhism called not Buddhism,
Yeah.
I think. Is that
I
right?
wrote a book called Why I Am Not a Buddhist, and I think that was in caps in a different color on the cover. Isn't that right, Evan?
Yes,
Why-
and I had nothing to do with the cover design.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too much dream yoga, Evan. Way too much dream yoga. So in any case, what I really love, so usually, when people come to Upaya, I'm leading meditation or some, bona fide contemplativist, but I force the scientists to step out of their role, since hopefully none of their colleagues will be online. And I'm not letting Adam lead meditation yet, I have to say. I don't know if you understand why, but you might be able to figure it out. He's too much fun. But in any case, it's a really important part of what we're doing. That is our capacity to actually allow ourselves to not only be in our small subjective experience, but to understand that the context of our experience, this very place is a state of mind. You're changing it by being present in it. Just like those of us who are in the Zendo. The Zendo has a kind of quality that actually has become something that is almost palpable, at least to me, after having sat there for so many years, where I know I walk into that space and I can feel my body, heart, and mind change. And our work here at Upaya is how do we mujo dono taigen? How do we actualize that sensibility in the lives outside of the Zendo? But we invite you online and all of us on site to join us at 7 in the morning, where John will be opening up practice for us. And as John reminded us, Molly will lead the afternoon session and Richie Sunday morning session. Because it is one thing for us to pack data into our brains, so to speak. But it's another thing to allow what you were speaking about on Wednesday, you know, the sort of wisdom quotient to emerge, for us to drop past the conceptual mind, deeper than the conceptual mind, into the substrate, so to speak, of what you were speaking, that wisdom perspective. But in that regard, would you share that koan that we were just speaking about in the library as a kind of metaphor for what we're doing in these few days together?
So in my Zen practice, good. Where is he? Where's the bottom?
I thought you were a scientist.
Oh, on the bottom. There we go. I got me a PhD. Right. So I do in my.
So just I wanted to say we're not in the same school.
True. Yeah, it's interesting. So that's one of the interesting things, that not all Zen practice, there are these different streams, uses koan practice in the same way. So koans are these stories, you know, they're often absurd when you first learn them. You're like, get out of here, that's insane. But in my tradition, you do what's called dokusan, where, you know, you're given a koan, and then you have to meet with the teacher, and you have to, what I love about koan practice is you don't answer it. You don't say, well, the answer is 6.25. You have to demonstrate. Often the correct answer is something you have to show. You have to present the answer.
It has to be
an experience, right. She knows more than so there's a koan I'm working on now, which is about eventually a great Zen master, Deshan. But when he was young, he was a scholar of the Diamond Sutra, which is, you know, one of the great Buddhist sutras. And he's quite arrogant and really is very well learned. But he hears about these Zen devils in the south of China who have this idea that, listen, enlightenment has nothing to do with book learning. You can have direct experience outside of the texts, outside of the sutras. So he sets off to stamp this out. He has all of his books, his commentaries, his brilliant commentaries on the Diamond Sutra on his back, and he sets out to go, you know, stamp this heresy out. And on the way there, he meets he wants to stop to get some tea cakes. And there's a woman, an old woman, who sells tea cakes. And these tea cakes, the translation, I guess, is mind refreshers. And he stops and asks, he wants to buy one. And this woman, who's actually a Zen master, like many cases, this is one of the few places in Zen where, you know, the women, we see all the enlightened women who were present at the time. She asks him, oh, what are those books on the back, on your back? And he says, oh, these are my commentary on the Diamond Sutra. And she says, oh, I've heard in the Diamond Sutra, it says that past mind can't be recognized, present mind can't be recognized or grasped, future mind can't be grasped. Tell me, sir, venerable monk, which mind will you be refreshing? And he's just dumbfounded, right? He doesn't, and he says, is there a Zen master nearby? Because she's obviously, you know, she's a student of the Zen master. So he goes to see the Zen master, and they end up having this long discussion all night, where this long talk. Longtan is the Zen master. And throughout the night, they're having this earnest discussion. I love that's what it says, that they're having this earnest discussion. And at some point, Longtan says, look, it's late. You should probably retire. Deshan gets up and goes to walk out, and he pulls the blind away, and it's pitch black. And he turns around, and I love this, that this is the line. He turns to Longtan and says, it's dark. And Longtan lights a candle for Deshan and hands it to him. And just as Deshan is grabbing it, Longtan blows it out. And at that moment, the line is, at that moment, Deshan had a great awakening. So that's that beautiful idea of all the learning, you get all the book learning, that's not really ultimately what you have. And it's that moment when the light blows out that suddenly you see. So that was that. Do I pass? Or ding-a-ling-a-ling, get out of here.
So, one little, and then, no, and then,
Yeah.
one little Rinzai tale. There's a Roshi, Yokota Roshi, in Kamakura, who is the abbot of a temple called Engakuji. And he's brilliant, and he's very experimental. And I had the great fortune of teaching with him a couple of times. It's such a radical thing to do. He has 20 monks in this monastery. He sees them every day for 5 seconds, more or less, if that. Sometimes as the monk is heading toward the Doksan hut, even before the monk goes down on the tatami, he rings the bell, right? He just rings them out. And it is a really interesting thing from my point of view, because he feels them coming toward him. And it is completely intersubjective. And he knows if the mind is fresh or not. And if it's not fresh, out they go. So that is why we enjoy practice 3 times a day here at Upaya, to keep the mind fresh. But anyway, this is Sensei Noah Kodo Kigaku Rowan Rossiter.
I hope your mind is fresh.
He's fresh, but not in the right way.
Oh, well, thank you for this wonderful introduction to what's coming, and I'm excited to get into it with you all. And we have paper and pens in the back, so please take advantage of this opportunity to write some questions. And the teachers, they meet during, are you going to do this year? You meet during the meals and review the questions and really kind of pull the threads together. So there won't be so much kind of back and forth Q&A as kind of a collation of all of what's on everyone's minds, including online. You see me over there. Make sure. So I usually do an introduction at the beginning. So the first thing I want to say is, if anybody needs hearing assistance, we have these devices. So sorry we didn't get these to you yet. So please let me know after this. You can come by, and we have got plenty of these. That's the first thing. And then, of course, gratitude for traveling so far from many places, some of you from across great distances. So welcome to Upaya. And thank you for coming, and thank you for your teachers. We went back and forth on whether we were going to have an in-person Varela Symposium this year. Of course, we're going to do it online, and thank you to our wonderful Cloud Sangha. Doesn't sound very loud. Louder. I have to be more like Adam Frank. Your mic wasn't on the whole time, and it was fine.
New Jersey. That's good. Loud, noise, fast. Welcome to Upaya.
So I have tremendous gratitude for our teachers, for all of us here, and for all of you online. And the thing that we always say is the generosity of so many have made it possible for us to be here in this beautiful building, having a program like this. It all is due to the support of many wonderful people, benefactors, residents, teachers, and so forth. So thank you all for your generosity in making it possible. And at the end, if you find what has transpired is illuminating, then I'll also ask you to give generously. And if it hasn't, you can give too. So just a few notes for those of you, especially who are here on campus. The lights should be on outside now, and I'm still working with the systems. We're in a new building, so please, bear with us as we figure it out. And do let me know, or let us know if there are any things that happen, clogged drains or lights out or anything like that. We'd really be happy to know so we can fix them. For those of you traveling from sea level, you'll notice you're at elevation here. Some of you might take more time to acclimatize than others. So just note if you feel a little dizzy or a little lightheaded, that's very normal. Drink water. That's the main thing to keep your blood pressure up. Drink water. So we have two water fountains there and a bottle filler right there. There are filtered water in the kitchen as well. You can bring your water bottles in here. Just please don't drop them on the floor, let them tip over, or Roshi might have a stroke. Every time that happens,
Don't want.
let's keep Roshi alive and don't drop your water. Also, if they're wet on the bottom, they can sometimes stain a little bit. So just make sure they're dry. In the Zendo, please don't bring in your water bottles. This is just for the meditations in the morning and the afternoon. Just leave those outside. In the bathrooms, because you'll be drinking a lot of water, there are two bathrooms right here. And during a break, sometimes a long line can form. There are 4 more bathrooms in the kitchen and Zendo area. So you're welcome to kind of go in the back there, take your shoes off and go to the bathrooms there. And if you're here staying in any of the new buildings, please maybe go back to your room to use the bathroom there. Cell phones are little nascent AI devices. We'd like to not hear them during the session. So if you please turn them off or leave them in your room, better yet. And then during the meditations, sometimes they ring. So definitely leave them behind. Let's see. Yeah, basically, I'm here to support. Bonnie in the back is also here to support. You can find us if you need anything. And our residents are here joining us who have worked so hard to make everything prepared for this wonderful program. So thank you to the residents. I look at you, you're not a resident, but you should be. If they're wearing black, they're probably a resident. So you can ask any of us if you need anything to support your time here. That's about it for me for now. So
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Noah, so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So it is our custom to conclude the evening with the 4 vows of the Bodhisattvas. So we will do that now. And just to know, Koshin, I just found another bell. So hopefully next week we'll have a bell in here. Don't feel like you have to transport one from the Zendo.
And just before we do the vows, so with the questions, Noah Sensei, Kodo Sensei, will we how are we going to gather those questions? Are we going to have a spot in the kitchen area or something, or dining room, or?
I think it might be if we could have the pens and paper here and people actually leave their questions here. I think we'll have a little bite and then we'll come into the library to meet. Yeah. So
I'll put a basket on this windowsill here next to the paper and pens.
Great.
And that'll be the basket of ignorance. No. The basket of knowledge.
that's the 4th Vinaya.
Yes.
And then for online, we would so appreciate you putting your questions in the chat and Noah will capture them and print them up for us. Okay. Thank you so much. And we chant this just to remind us that this is not about hedonic curiosity, but it is really how we can live a life that is truly about benefiting all species, and to not forget to keep really in front of us the vows that we take, the commitments we have made, our intention, and what our motivation really is. So let us put our hands together. Creations are numberless. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time passes swiftly and opportunity is lost. Let us awaken, awaken. Do not squander your life. Thank you, John, Molly, Kristen, Ev, Adam, and all of you. And a special thanks to the residents who practice here, who perfume the Zendo with their deep intention to awaken and to be of benefit to others. And Noah and Bonnie and the staff, all the underhood things that happen here that seem invisible to most, appear to be invisible to most, but there are so many moving parts to having a place like this bloom. And you are part of it, our staff, our residents, and also those who have contributed in so many ways. So I hope we'll see all of you online and on site in the virtual and physical Zendo in the morning when John will hold forth. Thank you so much, John. Good night, everyone. Thank you.